Mirabar is just one of the many city-states that exist in the Sword Coast North region of Faerun. It sits atop the ruins of an ancient Dwarven kingdom called Gharraghaur, brought low by an orc horde. Mirabar is a wealthy city that continues to benefit from the resource-rich Spine of the World mountains that Gharraghaur tapped into all those years ago, while having a split human and dwarven population that have blended their cultures over time. So please come delve into the history and environs of Gharraghaur and Mirabar. Borders of Gharraghaur. Present-day Mirabar is where the capital of Gharraghaur existed. The kingdom extended along the length of the river Marar, which the dwarves in their day called the Talner. The great number of ancient mines Mirabar find in the hills and mountains of the Spine of the World are evidence of Gharraghaur's prolific mining. The border of Gharraghaur was as follows. I provide the dwarven names of some of these locations as we go from place to place. First, we start just north of present-day Port Last, along the Sword Coast North. There is some rocky headland with blue veined stone which the dwarves called Lintara. The border trails to the southeast to present-day Mount Hotenau, which was called Glaurym. The border continued east along the Neverwinter River, called the Nethler, down to the river's forks, called the Nethu Folk. The border dipped up to the northeast to Twilight Tor, known as Anordain, traveling south to Baron's Hill, known as Marinalore, encompassing the Star Metal Hills. The border continued east to the confluence of the Shining Creek, the Shardnylur, and the Goblin Tide River, the Garlnylur. We travel up the length of the Shining Creek into the Lurkwood, or the Vurakwood, to two small hills within the forest, Marax Tor and Havla Tor. The border next falls within the Vale of Kedron to the north. It was here that the legendary dwarf Kedron established the first shield dwarf foothold in northwestern Faerun. Following northeast through the vale, we come to an alpine meadow the dwarves called Kedvelahir, within the Spine of the World. The dwarven name for the Spine of the World was the Berak Monalor, which translates directly into Spine of the World in common. The border ran west across the length of the Spine of the World, occasionally claiming some of the southern mountains. This line ended at the Black Raven River, which was known as the Velanur. From the Black Raven River, the border ran south to the river Marar. From the southern bank of the Marar, the border ended at the coast. Gharraghaur's capital stood where Mirabar is presently. The kingdom had two major fortresses up on the surface to oversee the realm. The first was a fortress called Orglant. It stood at the confluence between the Black Raven and the Marar rivers to the northeast. The second was called Halalnaskar. It stood south of the Lurkwood at the headwaters of the Shining Creek. The stones of these fortresses were taken by future builders after Gharraghaur fell. The only thing remaining of them is their stone cellars. Both cellars are filled with water. Those adventurers who have been down into these waters say any dwarven treasure was either taken by the dwarves or future looters. Otherwise, the cellars are now inhabited by other dangerous creatures who use these locations as their dens or lairs. History of Gharraghaur. Gharraghaur was founded in negative 4,819 Dale Reckoning and fell in negative 3,611 Dale Reckoning. This was a stretch of 1,208 years. It was one of several shield dwarf kingdoms to emerge in northern Faerun after the collapse of the Dwarven Empire of Shantar to the south. Gharraghaur was the name of a great dwarven warrior whose name was then used as the name for this dwarf kingdom. Though nothing is said about the exploits of Gharraghaur, the warrior, in any of the source books, Gharraghaur was ruled by a singular royal house for its many years, the Royal House of the Helm. It is not said whether Gharraghaur himself was part of the Royal House of the Helm. I do think it is likely that he was, but that's speculation. The lineage of this dwarven family is believed to have died off. The two renowned kings of Gharraghaur were Anauroch and his son Relivir. While the name Anauroch is familiar for the name of the Anauroch Desert, no one has discovered any connection between the two. The royal seat of power was known as the Iron Tower. No remnants of this tower remain above ground, but the people of present-day Mirabar use many of its subterranean chambers to store their grains and other wealth. Whether the people of present-day Mirabar are aware that these ancient chambers once housed dwarven royalty is not said. Gharraghaur has the unfortunate distinction as the first dwarven kingdom in northwestern Faerun to fall to the hordes of the orcs. Orc hordes have been a consistent problem in this region of the world since its ancient days. The dwarves of Gharraghaur were too caught up in mining the resource-rich hills of the spine of the world to establish any sort of defense against the rampaging orcs when they came. Gharraghaur's western border ran along the Sword Coast, but they themselves had no port. Rather, they conducted their trade primarily with Hongdanar, a contemporaneous dwarven kingdom just to the south. They also used underground roads throughout the Underdark to reach other southern trading partners. The symbol for Gharraghaur was 3 diamond-shaped gems that formed a triangle, then with a larger diamond in the middle of this triangle. Border markers can still be found along the River Mirabar that bear Gharraghaur's symbol. History of Mirabar. Mirabar was founded in 626 Dale Reckoning by Prince Oreskis Torlaf of Despite being a human, Oreskas's newly founded settlement bore a name with a suffix bar. This suffix is commonly used by dwarven holds in northwestern Faerun. Some current-day examples are Sundabar, Felbar, and Adbar. It isn't said whether Oreskis did this purposefully or coincidentally. I personally think he wanted to attract dwarves to his new settlement, so he named it as such. As it is, Mirabar did not start bringing in the wealth it is known for until dwarves came to settle in the city. Oreskis came north with a powerful sword called Namara, the sword that never sleeps. It was in the royal family of for a few generations at this time. Oreskis died in 693 Dale Reckoning, with no heirs, and Namara was placed atop his tomb. I have to wonder if during Oreskis' rule, or after his death, if the leadership title of Marchion was instituted for Mirabar. In 753 Dale Reckoning, hordes of goblins marched out of the valley of Kedron and sacked Mirabar, plundering its wealth. The goblins claimed Namara from Oreskis' tomb, though the sword moved into other hands with the passage of time. Local Uthgard tribes whittled down the goblin hordes before another alliance of humans out of the Deseren Valley routed the goblin forces. This period came to be known as the Goblin Wars. Despite the depredations of the goblin hordes, Mirabar recovered. The city developed a trade relationship with the ancient city of Alusk, which is where Luskan is currently built. Thanks to this relationship, Alusk was able to rebuild its walls in 812 Dale Reckoning. Many years pass when in 1023 Dale Reckoning, the then ruler of Alusk attempted to conquer Mirabar, but failed. As greater mercantile opportunities began opening up across the Sword Coast, several dwarf clans left old clan holds to secure a future in fortune elsewhere. One of the major movements of dwarves occurred at an unspecified time, but before 1357 Dale Reckoning, the first year of the published realms. Ilgstrog Star and 32,000 dwarves set out from Citadel Adbar with intentions to settle in Mirabar and its surrounding regions. As they traveled west, they were beset by orcs who reduced their number by half. Sestar's group came to Mirabar, and there they lived for a time. This was until Ilgostrog grew disillusioned with Mirabar. He and his staunchest allies set out further west. Ilgostrog soon died after looking out over the sea for the first time. Rather than return back to the region around Mirabar, the dwarves built the fortress of Ironmaster and have lived below and along the coast ever since. Mirabar was ruled by Marcion Alastolrorum in the middle to late 14th century. He benefited from the lack of true competition as the city's coffers grew and grew. He was known for living a life of luxury, his bulk, and his lust for women. Before winter came, Alastol would take the road southwards where it was warmer. He sought out rich trading partners who lacked metal that Mirabar easily supplied. For much of the 14th century, Mirabar stood as the richest inland settlement of the Sword Coast North region. It was the prime supplier of ore, metal, and gemstones. If Mirabar spurned any important power or nation, that entity would find themselves in dire straits without much needed ore and metal. In 1367 Dale Reckoning, a wizard named Shudra became Septrana of Mirabar and ruled Mirabar alongside the then Marcion Alastolrorum, with the Council of Speaking Stone immediately beneath them in authority. In 1369 Dale Reckoning, a goblin tribe called the Creeth had long been mining out the crags to the south of Mirabar. Their extensive mining of gems led to the collapse in the side of a hill. Prior to this, the Creeth had dug their way beneath Mirabar. The goblins carried out secretive forays into the city unbeknownst to the city guard. They tried to win the poor of Mirabar to their side to little success. The depredations against the dwarves and humans traveling out of Mirabar near the crags did not go unnoticed, however. The Creeth lined the area around their holdings in the crags with many traps. Coincidentally, a crystal dragon by the name of Saurandala Gothlator had taken to wandering the north looking for a lair of her own not too long after the Creeth had their collapse. She hailed from the north of the Roran Desert, all the way on the other side of Faerun. She also was in pursuit of a specific artifact that might help to expand her capabilities with magic. Spotting the collapse in the side of the hill from the Creeth, she flew down and encountered the goblins. Without issue, she routed most of them. The dwarves of Mirabar were not aware of the dragon's presence, but they certainly heard the collapse caused by the goblins. A war band was formed to fight the Creeth if necessary. The dwarves came to the cave only to fight what little remained of the Creeth goblins. Upon learning of the dragon's presence, the dwarves took a diplomatic approach. They came to terms. The dwarves mined the cave, defend the cave, and even some would come to live in the cave. In turn, any gems and metals they did not want, the dragon could eat. The dragon was later given two titles by the dwarves: Lady Gemcloak due to her crystalline scales, and the Axe Mother given her later station over those dwarves who she allied with. This dwarven warband kept Lady Gemcloak's newfound lair a secret. They only spoke of it sparingly among their fellow dwarves in Mirabar, but it was never discussed with the humans. When the dwarves returned, they only spoke of the desolation and destruction carried out by the goblins and the crags. These dwarves formed a new group with the Axe Mother at its center. They called this group the House of the Axe. King Brunor Battlehammer, reopened and began to resettle Mithril Hall with dwarves in 1356 Dale Reckoning. Mithril Hall began to compete with Mirabar in its output of ore and metal. The Hall long had a legendary reputation for producing some of the greatest weapons to grace Faerun, so while Mirabar was long established, Mithril Hall's reputation alone cut in on the market. At first, the legend carried the Hall's success. Then, as more of their goods reached market, the legend proved to be true with actual pieces in hand. However, Mirabar remained the prime source of rich and fine stones taken from its quarries. The exorbitant harbor fees that Luskan had placed on Mirabar for years were reduced in response to Mithril Hall's perceived encroachment on trade. Previously, Luskan had Mirabar pay for many years in advance to use their port, so it was easy for Luskan to appear gracious and play nice. Either way, Mirabar began to pivot and explore other avenues to shore up and bolster their economy. Mages once used to protect their assets in Luskan were brought home. These same mages were sent out to find new veins of ore, protect caravans, and root out orcs and other dangerous creatures close to home. Marchion Elastororm brought in metallurgists, mages, and alchemists with the hopes of treating existing metal to be superior to Mithril Halls, along with hopefully developing a new alloy, granting them a dominant place in the metal trade once again. With Mithril Hall's entrance into the market, this also meant that Mirabar's ability to manipulate events lessened significantly. The city no longer might deny an army or warlord with much needed steel and effect wars and campaigns from far away. Mithril Hall then could step in as an alternative, if those armies and warlords weren't already enacting deals with the Hall to begin with. Calls for sabotage against Mithril Hall's operations were made, but the Marchion refused. Should Mithril Hall find out Mirabar's involvement, he feared the response Mithril Hall and its allies might mount against the city. As told in the Drist novel, The Thousand Orcs, King Brunor Battlehammer came to Mirabar in 1370 Dale Reckoning. While holding court, Mirabar gave their blessing to Mithril Hall. In actuality, it reached Brunor's ears that a deep-seated resentment existed towards his new kingdom from those on the Council of Sparkling Stones and the Marchion himself. What's more is the resentment was greater from the dwarves of Mirabar, a handful going so far as to be the ones to suggest infiltration and sabotage. The intention of Brunor's visit was to rouse the dwarves of Mirabar, to attract them back to a true dwarven hold and not one under the sway of humans who did not understand their traditions and legacy. As this first novel in the Hunter's Blade trilogy progresses, Brunor endears himself to many of the dwarves of Mirabar with his visit, only for those dwarves who met and housed Brunor to become alienated not by Mirabar, but by some of their own kin. Arguments and brawls eventually break out. Close to 400 dwarves leave Mirabar for Mithril Hall to live under the rule of King Battlehammer. In the spring of 1370 Dale Reckoning, an arc of flame appeared in the night sky above Mirabar. Bursting forth from this flame was a red dragon. This red dragon, to my knowledge, is not named in any sense. This red dragon was an unknown entity to any historian or scholar, so the running theory is that they came forth from another plane. From there, it started battering the upper city of Mirabar. The appearance of this dragon was noted from the crags to the southwest. A warning bell was rung from that far away. Within moments, a glittering crystal dragon was upon this red dragon, crawling and biting into it. Having sustained several wounds, the red dragon fled to the west. However, the crystal dragon was unrelenting in her pursuit and laid into the red dragon, given her prodigious speed. The red dragon flew into the sea to the west, where it inevitably drowned. This was the night Mirabar learned it had a crystal dragon watching over it. Though they did not know, and even now in the 1490s Dale Reckoning, still do not know where she came from. During the Draco Rage of 1373 Dale Reckoning, Lady Gemcloak initially retreated into the Plane of Air to escape the Draco Rage's effects. However, a powerful red dragon named Clouth remained on the Prime Material and came under the influence of the King Killer Star. Clouth began attacking Mirabar. Unable to ignore the pleas of her dwarven followers, the Axe Mother came back and drove off Clouth. However, even she came under the effects of the Draco Rage and began attacking the surrounding area. After her rampage, she fled into the elemental Plane of Fire to face a self-imposed trial by fire. A clan of Azers found the weak Axe Mother and aided her. These Azers were led to her through a vision from Moradin. Lady Gemcloak returned to the House of the Axe to find the dwarves still grateful to her for fighting off Clouth, despite the damage and the deaths her own subsequent rage brought. This response only deepened the relationship between her and her dwarven followers. Taking a big leap ahead in time, after the Second Sundering, Mirabar still is wealthy, even in the face of Mithril Hall and now Gauntlgrim's production and presence in similar markets and products. It would appear rather than respond to the threat with sabotage and intrigue, the miners and craft workers of Mirabar have instead decided to work that much harder. Finished products coming out of Mirabar these days often blend human, dwarven, and elven designs, which harken back to the old kingdom of Lorm. Government of Mirabar. Mirabar is governed by a council who in turn has a hereditary leader as their head. The council is known as the Council of Sparkling Stones, named after the hall they meet in. There are 42 members on the council, excluding the Marchion, and they are all elected to their seat. The leader of Mirabar bears the title of Marchion. The council meets annually in autumn to decide how much metal and rock can travel the roads and waterways, and how to shore up Mirabar's own defenses and stores. More importantly, however, is deciding which nations and city-states to trade with. The council meets in the Hall of Sparkling Stones. Proceedings take 4 days. During this time, debate, speeches, and a secret ballad are held. A large feast is held afterwards for all the council. Voting for council positions take place in the spring, but those new members elected to the council do not formally take their position until the later annual meetings in the fall. The title of Marchion, as mentioned before, is a hereditary position. It is not stated if there have been several different familial dynasties who have held the title of Marchion. Currently, the title may still remain with the Roram family. I will note that between Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide and Storm's King Thunder, there is a discrepancy in what the Marchion's surname is. His name is given as both Selen Roram and Selen Ramor in Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, then solely named as Selen Ramor in Storm King's Thunder. To get back to the man himself, Selen has proven to be a capable spokesperson and leader for Mirabar. He has the respect of the council, and they trust him to look out for Mirabar while traveling abroad. He threatened that Mirabar might leave the Lord's Alliance after its member states failed to come to aid in the face of attacking orc hordes during the War of the Silver Marches that took place between 1484 and 1485 Dale Reckoning. Many from outside consider this empty posturing, but it has bought him some respect in other cities. The council has a mix of human and dwarven members. Second edition does mention some by name. Just without knowing their ages, I cannot guess whether some of the dwarven members may still be alive, though the humans on the council have all but certainly passed on. During the second edition era, there were more humans on the council. One of the council members was a dwarven priest of Dumathoin, whose temple is mentioned later. Another was a Dwarven priest of Vergadane, though no temple or shrine to Vergadane in Mirabar is mentioned. Among the rest are warriors, merchants, and one named adventurer. The makeup of the council has shifted in the present day. Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide tells that there are only a few humans known on the Council of Sparkling Stones. Most are dwarves. I am not sure if it is common practice still, but when written in 2nd edition, the Marchion left Mirabar after meeting with the council in the fall. The leader of Mirabar rode south, convening with heads of state and mercantile powers to pass along the decisions of the Council of Sparkling Stones. While on the trek, they hash out trade deals and other terms. Mirabar is a member state in the Lord's Alliance. Briefly, the Lord's Alliance is a council made up of those leaders of various city-states along the northern Sword Coast, out in the Silver Marches, and among the western heartlands. The alliance was first formed to combat the mercantile goals of the Zentarum. Those in the alliance uphold that they will keep the peace with one another, while sharing intel and resources to combat regional threats like orc hordes or raiding pirates. Mirabar's symbol is a rusty red double-bladed axe with a flared end at the base of its shaft. The axe is flown against a black or purple background on land. The Axe of Mirabar, the city guard, display the symbol on their shields. Out at sea, the axe is flown against a white background. Mirabaran merchants own their own ships that sail out of Luskan. Mirabar's relations and holdings. The mining town of Fireshire sits in the very northern reach of the Sword Coast region. Plenty of silver and copper is mined from the crater near the town. It is run by 3 powerful merchant companies from 3 major cities: Mirabar, Neverwinter, and Waterdeep. The company from Mirabar is called Hamaver House. Luskan feels to me as if it knows it can abuse the fact that Mirabar has to depend on it as a shipping port. Even if Luskan lessened the fees heaped onto Mirabar for using its waters once Mithril Hall began encroaching on Mirabar's profits. When Luskan's captains feel threatened by the presence of one too many authoritative powers from outside their city, they come inland. While inland, they may target nearby Uthgar tribes, as well as Mirabaran miners. They do this to their neighbors to keep them, quote, weak and respectful. Young Mirabaran dwarves who travel to Luskan used to paint the sheep that were penned in the city walls as a rite of passage. The residents of Luskan saw to it that this never happened again, as any dwarf they caught was dealt with violently. Luskan has its own Mirabaran district called the Mirabar Shield. The Mirabarans ensure it is difficult to get into this district. It is completely surrounded by tall stone walls lined with spikes and thorns. At least during the 2nd edition era, 3 trading companies owned the shield and operated behind these walls. Their names are the Anvil Fist Banner, the Loren's Many Metals, and Golden Hand. Together they could muster 90 guards to defend the district. I believe when another source mentions Mirabar has a fleet of ships, they are referring to those owned and operated by the various merchant families of Mirabar. Most of the ships can be found docked up by Mirabar's shield in Luskan. Still, Mirabar has forts built both on Ruathim and Mintarn where their ships can dock as well. The fleet is made up of 30 cogs. Each are fortified and armed. There are then 30 other smaller and faster caravels and coasters that are part of the fleet. Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide does mention Mirabar has many such harbors and forts on the various islands out in the Sea of Swords, so it's entirely possible they have expanded their operations and reach further. Mirabar's resources and industry. All varieties of metallic ore are sourced from Mirabar's mines. The spine of the world holds many dangers, chiefly orcs that threaten Mirabar's existence. The city has a standing army of 1,000 men and dwarves who protect both the mines and city proper. They are called the Axe of Mirabar. During the summer, the standing army ride mountain ponies, and in colder weather they ride domesticated rothae. Each merchant house in the city has its own private retinue of guards who come to the defense of the city. This adds potentially 500 more warriors to the city's defenses. Otherwise, these private guards are found protecting the various mine entrances owned by their patron families. It is expensive to ship and cart marble and other rich stone from this far north. Often, such stone is magically enchanted to float during its travel. While it makes transport easier, it only increases the cost. The quarries of Mirabar have such an exacting standard that further increase their reputation. Often, the standard is not upheld by competitors elsewhere. Mirabar's appearance and layout. Aesthetically, much of Mirabar is plain and drab. Both the above-ground and below-ground architecture leaves much to be desired. It is all stark gray stone work, though there are some exceptions that will come up later. Most in Mirabar see artistic and flavorful flourishes as meaningless and wasteful. The city's coin and wealth is used on practical pursuits and resources. One of these chief resources is the defense of the surface city. The destruction of Sundabar's surface city in 1484 by orcs is prominent in the minds of city officials. The walls and gates of Mirabar are especially well fortified and maintained as a result. Spellcasters and adventurers are often hired to patrol roads, looking to destroy property and other threats to their trade. Mirabar has a series of thick defensive walls set up in 7 concentric rings. The outside face of these walls is sloped. Arrows and crossbow bolts can strike easily at those at the base of such walls. The defenders often will pour water down these sloped walls to freeze in colder weather. This makes the walls slick and difficult to ascend. There are 4 major gates at each cardinal direction in the outer wall. Starting in the north and going clockwise, there is the North Gate, East Gate, the River Gate facing south, and Sunset Gate facing west. The North Gate is used primarily by those bringing in mine resources from the spine of the world. The East Gate is where the Axe of Mirabar's headquarters stand. River Gate leads to the bridge that crosses over the nearby River Mirar. Sunset Gate is the gate favored by visitors and merchants to the city. Although it is unsaid, likely this is where amenities for visitors and travelers are found. Now, I believe I am interpreting this next bit as correctly as possible about Mirabar as it is described in 2nd edition's Guide to the Savage Frontier. In between each defensive wall is a major ring road. Along each ring road are the various gates that lead further into or out from the center of Mirabar. Just the gates are staggered and not lined up with one another. Because Mirabar's architecture is so similar throughout the city, images were carved into the stone walls along a road's length to let a person know which street they were on. Some examples of named roads in Mirabar are Griffin Street, Manticore Street, Flame Street, and Anvil Street. The 4 outer gates have many defenses. Each has a double metallic gridwork palisade, a large slab of granite 3 feet thick, and an ironwood barricade enchanted to be immune to fire. These are lowered to defend against city invaders. The gates along the other 6 inner walls are less protected. Each has a single metallic gridwork palisade and regular ironwood barricades. Save some unnamed specific buildings, Mirabar as a whole is not warded against those spellcasters who can then teleport or gate into Mirabar without issue. Mirabar forbids the public circulation of maps of the city. A couple noble families in Waterdeep, then the library at Candlekeep, have one in their possession, but mages under the employ of the city have done a good job ensuring no more are published. To create a map of Mirabar is a hangable offense. I have to wonder if this may be a reason why no map of Mirabar has been published in any source books or novels. A staircase at the center of Mirabar leads down to an entrance into the Undercity. This entrance is the most heavily defended place in Mirabar. Whether it is defended by troops, magical wards, and/or strong defensive barricades was not indicated. Traveling below ground, Mirabar is divided into different levels. The levels below the surface are known as the belows. There are either 6 or 7 of them, going from the first below to the 6th or 7th below. Unsurprisingly, there is discrepancy between sources. On whatever the last below may be, there are tunnels that lead deeper into the Underdark. Only the brave merchants and traders use these tunnels, given the inherent dangers of the Underdark. These tunnels connect to the several tunnels and Underdark roads that spread out across northwestern Faerun. A common expression unique to Mirabar is, quote, "They sunk beneath the 7th below." This refers to an unlucky, depressed, or poor individual. Many mines are connected to the belows. Not to mention, the Dwarven population primarily lives on the upper subterranean levels of Mirabar. In 2nd edition sources, it is mentioned an Alhun may have been operating in the low levels of Mirabar, subsequently controlling dwarves to then do its bidding in the city. Several of the Dwarven population serve in the Acts of Mirabar. They chiefly deal with threats underground, both under Mirabar proper and elsewhere. The lower you go in Mirabar, the less control the city has over its holdings, though greater quality ore is found at these lower depths. There is a large walled garden set in the heart of Mirabar up on the surface. This garden is enchanted with a control weather effect, so as to function throughout the year despite the long cold winters in the north. Such a large garden allows Mirabar to be less dependent on outside settlements for produce. Not to mention Luskan has attempted to starve out Mirabar many times in the past. Several shafts from downwards bring warm fresh water up from the Underdark. The local shrine to Shantia is found at the center of this garden. The information on the businesses and other places of note throughout Mirabar are often taken from older sources. Given the large skip in time from 3rd edition to 4th edition of 100 plus years, it may be that some of these businesses are still active. I'd rather describe them as they are presented and let you decide if they are operating in present-day Faerun. Galvendo's Lodge was run by a human ranger by the same name. It is described in a 2nd edition source. The lodge was somewhere in Mirabar, perhaps just inside the first ring wall. Galvendo was popular for his excursions out into the frozen lands of northwestern Faerun to hunt large game and creatures. Despite the clear danger, people paid good money and spoke highly of Galvendo and his hunts. Galvendo advertised how none had died on his lead ventures, though that wasn't true. On 3 occasions, people died from bears or winter wolves. However, Galvendo had a business partner and companion who was a cleric of Lathander. This companion raised all 3 from the dead. Even those that died still gave raving reviews of Galvendo's services. The House of the Bright Blade was a store described in the 2nd edition era of the Forgotten Realms. The house was run by Zespara Alathir, a human swordsmith of great renown across Faerun. She herself was also a harper, and occasionally left her smithy to adventure. The front of the Bright Blade was full of all sorts of daggers and swords of varying styles, lengths, and finishes. The quality of these blades demanded a higher price tag compared to your typical blade. The older sources mention that Zespara had a couple dwarven apprentices and a few human apprentices who were all women. Or a couple human and a few dwarven apprentices. You do have to love those discrepancies. The dwarven apprentices may have gone on to become the masters and owner of the shop. One of the dwarven apprentices' name is Calothra Morgir. It may be that Zespara's family still practiced this trade, or some resident of Mirabar has also come to own the shop. Really, any combination of those elements may still be possibilities as to how the House of the Bright Blade is still in operation. Zespara had a wizard friend enchant the shop so she could move any blade in the shop into her hand. As much as this was to help her fetch swords out of reach, she could also brandish them as if casting the blade barrier spell if need be. Zespara did not set gems or other gaudy pieces into the hilts of her swords. She felt such things needlessly threw off the balance of the blade. She still did other decorative work, though the function of a blade well outweighed form for her. The shop had a sentient sword, if it is still there. This was another gift from a wizard friend of Zespara to help protect her shop. The sword was all too keen to discuss news from abroad with customers and clients who came to the House of the Bright Blade. The blade did not provide any information about who he is, though the sword contained the trapped soul of a wizard. There's even more to the House of the Bright Blade. It was built atop a former temple to Auril. You can reach what is left of the temple through a trapdoor in the hallway beneath the smithy and the shop. Occasionally, Auril's worshippers would find their way into the ruined temple, only for Zespara, her apprentices and the dwarves who lived nearby, to then drive them out. When the Aurelians found their way in, they were using tools on the walls in attempts to find something. What might be in behind the walls goes unsaid. The Gilded Hall of Glimmering Gems, or as it is known as Akorak Splendorsun in Dwarven, sits in the third below of Mirabar. It is a natural cavern connected to some of the city's mines. This space was consecrated as a temple to the dwarven god Dumathoin back during the days of Gharraghaur. No year is given, but the temple was consecrated by the then ruling monarch, King Anarok of the Royal House of the Helm. The core of the temple sits in an intricate network of golden ore. The clergy of Dumathoin manipulated and removed the stone to reveal all the golden veins. This both served to expand the temple while revealing more of the natural beauty of this cavernous space. Several gemstones were enchanted to float about the temple. Some of them were enchanted to be continual sources of light. As a result, all sorts of colors cascade and shine across the temple's interior. It isn't said how the Gilded Hall stood after Gharraghaur fell, or how the Mirabarans found it. Regardless, it is active once more. Both dwarves and some humans come to this temple to worship Dumathoin. Almost all taverns are marked out with a simple sign in Mirabar. They are not active in loud places. They serve only as a place to grab a drink or two after a hard day's work with little conversation. The Goblet and Gems is known as the only lively hub in Mirabar. The building resembles a helmet and it is made from black stone. It is both a tavern and fest hall. A floating large backlit sign with the image of a goblet identifies the establishment. One of the primary features of this establishment are the gems themselves. The gems are escorts who have varying ancestries, some as far-ranging as Karatur. There is a main common room which accommodates live music and dancing at night. During the day, the goblet is a quiet place to have a drink, make conversation, or plot. There are small side rooms where clientele interact with the gems. Each booth has a back exit where the escorts can lead their clientele upstairs, outside, or down to a gambling room directly beneath the dance floor. Each of the gems is an agent for the ruling council of Mirabar. A gem can easily escape from someone through a secret rope and pulley elevator hidden behind every tapestry in the goblet. 12 members of the local guard are stationed in the basement should any alarm be raised. The goblet was once a local haunt for an archmage called Orendum. He wore a mask that resembled a skull and often turned those who displeased him into worms or slugs. He hid a replenishing gem of spell storing somewhere in the goblet. Orendum named this stone the Mythong Dwarba, after the mage who he killed and took the stone from. No one has ever found it. The sign of the Forge Hammer is likely one of a handful of inns in Mirabar. It is the only one mentioned by name and given any information. It sits right near the river gate on the inside walls of Mirabar. The inn stands in a walled compound with stables, a strong house, and kitchen garden. The walls of the compound and the copper-plated front doors both display the image of a hammer with its handle pointing downwards. The lighting inside is dim, but the Forge Hammer has private rooms. If you want further information about the food and prices of the goblet and gems, and the sign of the Forge Hammer, refer to the 2nd edition sourcebook, Volo's Guide to the North. The Hall of Sparkling Stones sits on its own knoll in the center looking out over the city. It is a stone fortress. The hall houses the personal quarters of the Marchion. The hall itself has a high vaulted ceiling. The ceiling has a stained glass sun roof. The image on the glass shows the axe of Mirabar surrounded by different colored dragons mid-flight. The table where the council convenes sits below. The table is made from polished black marble and carved in the shape of a ring. 4 passages pass through the table to provide access to a podium that stands in the middle of the ring. The Council of Sparkling Stones meets here, of course, but trials are given in the hall, and important dignitaries come to meet here as well. There are several offices for the various council members and those who work under them. Agents can move between secret passages and between the rooms to help protect those in residence at the hall. The floor has various images depicted upon it, and those images are traced in all varieties of metals. Balconies sit along the walls. Set in the balconies and walls are many belgerols. The belgerol is a gemstone unique to the realms that occasionally gives off a glimmer of light. There are several houses and businesses owned by wealthy merchant families that contain several treasures within. Such buildings are built with rich stone and have inset gems throughout. These families tend to have luxuries that are on the eccentric side, singing metal birds and bell trees that ring a different tune when each leaf is pressed. These rich families do test visitors in their homes. Expensive jewelry, baubles, and silverware are set out just to see if any of it goes missing. Mirabar, of course, is full of smithies, metalworks, stonemasons, and all other trades that work with metal or stone. Between those shops ran up on the surface and those dwarven-run establishments on the first below, any client or customer is spoiled for choice. Mirabar's culture and lifestyle. The last given population of Mirabar was in 3rd edition's Forgotten Realms campaign setting sourcebook. The city's total population was listed as 10,307 people. There was the exodus of dwarves from Mithril Hall discussed earlier, but some earlier realm sources mentioned that Mirabar's population was 23,000. This is quite the decrease in the population of Mirabar. In any case, the stated split in percentage between human and dwarves in the older books is 19,000 or 83% who are human and 4,000 or 17% who are dwarves. 5th edition's Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide does mention that in the current era, there is a smattering of gnomes and halflings who live in Mirabar as well. Another acceptable term for someone from Mirabar is Mirin rather than Mirabaran. You will find some places of worship devoted to members of the Faerunian pantheon. The humans who live above ground have shrines dedicated to Shantia and Tymora. Over Mirabar's history, many of the human miners have come to worship the Dwarven pantheon instead. The Dwarves have such shrines and temples to their gods built in the subterranean portion of Mirabar. I already touched on one of them, devoted to Dumathoin. Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide does mention that a small number of dwarves now live above ground and a small number of humans live below ground. Though the dynamic remains more or less the same, humans up above, dwarves down below. Mirabar has several mercantile families. In the past, rivalries were intense with bouts of violence when mines ran into one another, or if the wrong caravans crossed one another out on the open road. It was discovered that these families were cajoled by agents from Luskan to Zentarum, and even a few from Hellgate Keep. Presently, the mercantile houses act together to defend against such influences from outside Mirabar. The dwarves of Mirabar typically sport beards that are long and wide, rather than a style where dwarves will taper their beards or bring them to a point, sometimes with the use of braids and other accoutrements. They do often braid the hair on the top of their head instead. Mirabaran dwarves are often wealthy and in the possession of some rare gems. They are fond of setting gems into the ends of their tools and weapons. They have signet rings made from gemstones. Second edition's The North Guide to the Savage Frontier says that the disposition of the bulk of Mirabar's population matches the city's look. They are no-nonsense, determined but not hospitable or gregarious. Citizens are focused on their work and are hard drinkers. There is little crime in Mirabar. They do look out for their own, often going above and beyond to help fellows in the city or within the immediate area, but they are an insular population trusting of their own but distrustful of those from outside the city. 5th edition's Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, however, mentions that Miran dwarves often back projects along the Sword Coast, that these same dwarves decry the stubborn and traditionalist views of other dwarven holds and kingdoms, which all too often cross into xenophobia. These dwarves are often found serving as diplomats and mediators between dwarven parties, or a dwarven party and a non-dwarven party, which isn't entirely always welcomed, likely, especially by their fellow dwarves. This might be a discrepancy, though one might easily justify that in the many years that have passed between 3rd edition to 4th edition, Mirabar made an effort to shift its culture to one that is hospitable and outward-facing, especially considering the types of competition they face from nearby Mithril Hall in Gauntlgrim. There is a clear gap between the wealthy and those of simpler means in Mirabar. While there may be a smattering of the truly poor and destitute, Mirabar doesn't have a population that begs out in the streets, while a small elite indulge themselves. Still, the working class population has little chance of reaching such wealth as they comfortably get by. The wealthy Mirabarans interact among themselves with open displays of ostentatiousness and material wealth. However, as they go about in general public, they will wear the muted colors of other Mirabarans, though their clothes are made of richer cloth. The front foyers and antechambers of their estates are decorated sparsely to make it appear as if the wealthy and regular folk of the city live in much the same way. The wealthy are concerned with how those of lesser means might respond if they were to find out just how much coin they possess and how exactly they use their wealth. As mentioned a couple times already, gemstones are plentiful throughout Mirabar. The city, of course, uses coin for trade, but among the wealthy, they often will use gemstones in place of coin when trading amongst themselves. Outfits and attire feature gemstones prominently. The streets themselves have markers and signs that feature inlaid precious metals and gems. Geography and sites around Mirabar. Mirabar is connected to the south by the Long Road, which runs down through and past Longsaddle. They are connected to the west by Blackford Road that leads to Luskan. It takes approximately 7 days to reach Luskan and 8 days to reach Longsaddle. Both these roads are made from gravel. The river Marar runs to the west, but it is too dangerous for any trade vessel to sail. The river has a rapid current, contains far too many rocks, and is always frigid. Still, on midsummer between the months of Flame Rule and Alesis, Mirabar holds a 20-mile White River Rapids race in sealed leather kayaks. The nearby hills and mountain slopes are riddled with mines. Several of the mines to the west along the spine of the world, and those in the crags to the south on the other side of the river Marar, are spent. The people of Mirabar have repurposed these mines to be quarries. Other common sights seen in Mirabar's environs are large piles of waste rock, pulled up when mining, then chucked aside in large piles. Then piles of slag where smelting occurred to separate metal from the ore. Much of the quarried stone is used to maintain their portion of the Long and Blackford Road. The spine of the world holds a veritable wealth of natural resources. The Dwarves of Gharraghaur knew this, given their extensive mining, and the peoples of Mirabar have been rewarded accordingly for years, ever since the area was resettled. Though the spine of the world is a dangerous environment for both its climate, natural hazards, and the powerful creatures who live on its slopes, much of what precious resources the spine of the world holds has hardly been tapped. The Mirabaran dwarves stick to the mountains to the west of them. There they discover old Gharraghaur mines every summer with the melting of snow and ice. The Dwarves of Gharraghaur mine further to the east. However, these old mines are now the lairs and homes of orc bands and other worse creatures. Several of the disused mines in the crags are now home to all three types of goblinoids. This isn't a site within Mirabar's influence, but rather an ancient tomb from Gharraghaur. In 1351 Dale Reckoning, followers of Marthamor Duin, dwarven god of wanderers and explorers, found the crypt of Magar, son of Relavir and grandson of Anarok of the royal house of the Helm of Gharraghaur. This crypt was found in a cavern within Baron's Hill. The followers of Marthamor established the Vault of the Lost Wayfarer within this large cavern. The cavern was found empty of its various treasures and relics. Dwargar dug from below and into it and stole away with such riches and treasures long ago. Baron's Hill, along with Twilight Tor to the north, are two primary hills used by Marthamor's clergy both as religious sites and as places to monitor traffic within the Desserin Valley. Baron's Hill is the southernmost, and Twilight Tor is the northernmost hill, and the range of hills between the two is known as the Star Metal Hills. The deepest mines of Mirabar are linked, whether it is known to them or not, with underdark caverns and tunnels that run to Gauntlgrim and the Great Worm Caverns. The Great Worm Caverns hold the revered mound of the Great Worm Uthgart tribe. There is an old road from the days of Delzoun, another extinct dwarven kingdom of old, that runs from Citadel Adbar out in the east that then runs west to link up with Mithril Hall in Mirabar. Just outside Mirabar is an unspecified location, in other words, DM's choice, a portal called the Soggy Dwarf Portal by the local human population. A small group of dwarves from Mirabar travel to the Grey Peak Mountains to search out other forms of mineral wealth. You may recall I covered the Grey Peak Mountains in my Amarindar episode. The dwarves found the Grey Peak Mountains to be still full of precious resources. However, a group of local stone giants uncovered their small operation. In a small series of skirmishes and manufactured cave-ins by the giants, the dwarves eventually had a portal established just on the inside of the latest cave-in. The portal is a two-way portal that leads back out near Mirabar. The portal is set in the wall of one of the mines. A decorative archway marks out its borders, though the archway speaks to the grim fate of those who try to pass through. It was also made to resemble a worn archway from a bygone period. The article this information comes from does not mention Amarindar by name, but if I was running this location, I'd tie it back to that kingdom. The portal is keyed so that it will activate if a dwarf goes to pass beneath the archway. It is called the Soggy Dwarf because the mine flooded when the walls in a small group of tunnels gave way to water pouring in from a nearby valley lake. This water leveled out eventually but completely submerged the chamber that held the portal. Now when the dwarves enter or exit this mining operation in the Grey Peaks, they will use magical means in order to not drown. Further description of the Soggy Dwarf portal can be found in an archived web article from the 3rd edition era. I've included a link in the episode description. Lady Gemcloak's lair. Lady Gemcloak lives in an abandoned goblin mine beneath Bryn Crag, just to the southwest of Mirabar, and to the west of the Long Road. The entrance into her lair is on the eastern side, and it is called the Maw. The Axe Mother shares her lair with a group of Mirabaran dwarves who have made her lair also their hold. The dwarves call this hold the House of the Axe. This hold is kept secret from the rest of Mirabar. It was mentioned in earlier sources that the dwarves might form a new city or clan under Lady Gemcloak's protection. Rumblings have been heard throughout dwarven communities of a hold where dwarves of little to no standing might obtain a semblance of what their prestigious kin hold. How the situation stands in the present era wasn't found. The House of the Axe is led by a small group of a few dwarves known as the Dwarves of the Ring. They keep the price of mined gems taken from their caves high. Visitors are only limited to the Maw, the entrance into the house. The dwarves have instituted these practices since they are wary of some outside faction taking too much interest or learning too much about the true operations of the house. The House of the Axe has an extensive gem mining operation. The dwarves have expanded what the goblins left behind here. Lady Gemcloak rests in her own cavern called Wyrm Slumber, where she rests upon a bed of gems. The Creeth goblins laid several traps in this area before they were run out by Lady Gemcloak. The House of the Axe still maintains some of these traps. The Axe Mother is an aggressive combatant who values physical combat over magical spells. She sticks to flying over Mirabar and the surrounding Morar Valley, though she will not hesitate to go after prey or enemies as far west out over the sea or southeast over the Evermoors. On a given day, she is found lounging and talking with the dwarves of the House of the Axe about happenings in and outside the region. Lady Gemcloak does not fly out in the open, rather taking to the air at twilight, when it is misty or raining. The Axe Mother has learned to cast wizard spells, but she's at best an amateur having a single level in the class. She speaks to a desire to increase her skill set, but has seemed resistant to the idea of putting in the hard work necessary. At least during 3rd edition, Lady Gemcloak traveled to the elemental plane of fire to try and establish an alliance between a few Azer clans and the House of the Axe. She feels it is worthwhile to have Azers at her beck and call should a certain red dragon rear his head again. If you wish to read more about the Axe Mother and the House of the Axe, I will point you in the direction of either Dragon issue 254, the linked and archived web article that covers the same information, and 3rd edition's Dragons of Faerun. To the east of Raven Rock is Clouthen Vale, the location of the red dragon Clouth's lair. Clouth is a powerful ancient red dragon, also known by his moniker Old Snarl. As mentioned earlier, he fell under the influence of the Draco Rage and did extensive damage to the surface of Mirabar. He was driven off by Lady Gemcloak, but he has sworn to get back at Lady Gemcloak for this defeat. Clouth's power doesn't just stem from being just an ancient dragon. Rather, he is a powerful arcanist in his own right. 2 of his more powerful abilities are: 1. He has learned how to cast from wands using his wing claws, So not only will he blast the foe from afar with his fire breath, he can also lash out with the several wands in his collection. 2. He has learned how to draw power from the dragon eggs and wormlings he eats. He sets aside any red dragon eggs. Those specifically, he has developed a ritual around to increase his size and improve his health. His moniker, Old Snarl, comes from the rather angry expression worn on his face at all times. His body bears many missing scales and long healed-over scars likely suffered at the hands of other dragons. Klauth had flown over Mirabar once before, in an unstated year. He drew out a female red dragon, maybe by goading her or deceiving her. Either way, the two of them had a mid-air fight, which ended with Klauth eating her. In the actual valley of the Clothan Vale, Old Snarl has set up groups of dragon dietary staples: sheep, rothay, and goats. They graze and raise their young, but of course Klauth eats some of them later. He lounges up on one of the valley walls, watching for any who may enter in his domain. The walls of the valley contain several caves. 2 entrances are large enough for Klauth to slip into. His hoard is hidden underneath a massive slab of stone that only someone as large as him is capable of lifting. Far, far more can be said about Klauth. If interested, I direct your attention to the episode description, where there is a link to an archived web article from the 3rd edition era. I appreciate you listening to this episode. Links are found in the episode description to where you can stream, download, or listen to my content. Following this, we will be turning back to the Elven Pantheon with an episode on Airdrie, Vienna. Until next time, rock and stone, hammer and axe. Never break, never yield.